with terror, describing being taken by some energy, blue light, by these small humanoid beings into spacecraft, subjected to these complex procedures, and they were not in touch with each other. They had physical marks on their bodies afterwards that corresponded to where they were probed, and there's nothing in my experience as a psychiatrist that operates like that.
They didn't strike you as barking because... no, seriously, because... No, don't worry, we'll come... No, it's not. Because what I want to say is we've done phone-ins, and I've listened to phone-ins and read articles with people who've been through these experiences before, and I'm always struck with the paradox. One, what they're saying is frankly unbelievable, but they sound totally believable.
Exactly. In other words, here was this paradox of these people who are, as far as I could tell, I've investigated 90 of these cases now, sound of mind, completely believable, not believing it themselves, telling me with great doubt, not trying to claim anything or sell me anything. In fact, rather disturbed when they would hear there were other people who'd had the same experiences, because that would blow their denial, wanting to believe it was a dream. A point in the interview where I would say, well, tell me what happened. And they would say, well, I was in my bedroom watching TV, and then this blue light, and I said, well, you didn't say you'd been asleep. And then tears would come down their cheeks, and there would be this moment of shock because they would realize it wasn't a dream. Something had really happened.
Well, look, you two actually shared an experience together with a third friend who's now, she's gone to live in Canada or somewhere, hasn't she? Sort of, because she actually was genuinely very upset by what happened. Back in 1982, just to summarise, you'd all been out to a nightclub, but you had not been drinking.
That's right.
This is, hand on heart, you'd not been drinking.
That's right.
Well, you've been drinking Coca-Cola.
Yes,
right.
That's all. Well, as we were travelling home, same journey as we did every week, we just saw some strange lights in the sky. That's all we thought it was to start with, except that the lights were extremely bright, and you could see that the base of this craft or object was either round or oval.
And you all three of you saw it?
Yes, because we all drew what we saw about 2 weeks later when an investigator spoke to us about it.
So what happened next?
The car lost power. We followed it down the road, it disappeared, and we reported it at the local police station because there was 3 of us. Had there only been 1 of us, we never would have done. But because there was 3. Later on, about 2 weeks later, it was discovered that the journey had actually taken longer.
So hang on, so by the time you reported it to the police station, which seemed to you within minutes of you're actually leaving the nightclub,
well,
actually you found that hours had passed.
Well, we didn't, but the investigator did when he came and interviewed us.
He saw a discrepancy between what you saw as the time scale and what the actual time was.
Because when we got to the police station, we looked at our watches, obviously thinking, oh, what are they going to think going in at this time in the morning? And also because they logged the time that we went in.
So how did you discover what had happened in those lost hours?
Well, tell us.
Harry Harris, solicitor from Manchester, who's a UFO investigator, got in touch with us and asked us whether we would agree to undergo hypnotic regression.
Right.
We were a bit sort of dubious about it, but we eventually agreed to go.
You went. Now, which of you? One of you had difficulty actually.
Yes, that was me.
Was that you?
Yes.
What did you, when you went under hypnosis? What did you remember?
Once you actually get through the conscious memory, the first experience was just to experience very strange body changes, of which frightened me, and they brought me out of it. The second time, they took me through that fear until I described being in a room alone and being extremely frightened, not knowing where Valerie or Vivian were. There was a doorway in the room and a table. They asked me to look through the door, and I refused, and then I said I could hear someone coming, and I was extremely frightened, but I got onto the table. And they said, why are you getting on the table? And I said, because I know I've got to. And they said, how do you know? And I said, I just know. And then I was looked at by 6 robot-type creatures.
Robots?
Robots.
What,
that's how I did.
Sort of robots?
No, they were definitely robots. They've got no features, because they said, well, how do you know they're looking at you? And I said, well, I can tell that they're looking at me, because they didn't touch me or anything.
But what I mean is, were they robots built in the shape, in the rough shape, like a crash dummy, you know?
They got round type heads, round bodies on round coasters.
Right.
And that
Made
was
of metal?
Yes,
So,
nothing about them that looked humanoid or anything like that.
But then 2 other beings, much more humanoid beings, came into the room.
No, that was with Valerie.
So your memories were kind of different?
Our stories were totally different at this point, all 3 of us.
Yeah. And what were the beings who came when you went into hypnosis?
They were sort of 6 foot tall. There was a male and a female. I've been asked, how did you know? And I thought, well, I just knew that they were male and female.
And the female tried on your shoes?
Yeah, well, they seemed very interested in my clothes, what I was wearing, and the female tried on my shoes.
Were they humanoid? Did they look like us?
Yes, apart from they got very...
we were there.
Their eyes were very sort of bright blue.
Right. Now, to come back to you, John, is that kind of experience, that although these two ladies aren't in your book, because obviously you did your research in America, is that a common story, this feeling of being examined somehow?
Yes, that part's common. The terror, the kind of pushing through the terror. The beings they're describing are not typical of the most common type in the United States, which tend to be smaller, 3.5 to 4 feet tall, with these huge black eyes.
That's what Vivian saw.
That's what Vivian saw.
So
but there are other types described, like taller, luminous ones, more robotic ones, like she described, are also seen, more reptilian.
So what conclusions are we drawing from this? If these people aren't hallucinating, if they're not part of some kind of mass psychosis, if they are experiencing something, what's your conjecture?
Now, of course, that's a 64 billion pound question. I mean,
we can't pay you if you answer
I mean, you know, I've finally come after thousands of hours. I was told for 2 years, don't say what you think here. Don't say what you think. Just say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, you know. But after a while, the pattern becomes so powerful, so dense, that the only thing, I mean, no kind of psychiatric illness, so not hallucinating, fantasying, some other kind of trauma, none of it begins to work, because you have the UFOs, you have the cuts, the scoop marks, the independent witnessing, the people are absent. So some kind of another intelligence seems to be trying to knock on our doors to get through to us.
Something here.
Like the crop patterns you have here, too.
Why do we must sort of wrap this up and carry on later in the programme, because we're taking our phone in on it, but why do it in such a kind of small and individual way? If there really is another intelligence, why not sort of suddenly come down here and say, hey, you know, I'm here on national television or something?
Well, we like things this way or that way, you know. It's a subtle matter. It's perhaps preparing us slowly, gradually, letting us, because if they kind of showed up en masse, we'd panic or send out the RAF or something, you know, to get them. So
welcome on this show anytime.
Yes, please.
Come on down, guys.
Talk about viewing figures.
we don't need that. All right. Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you for now. You'll be back later on. What do you think? Is it the figment of a kind of overwrought imagination, or is it something more complicated psychologically, or do you believe it actually happens? Has it happened to you, or something like it? Give us a call on our Close Encounters hotline on the usual number, 051 555 1000. You're back to take the calls, and the lines are open right now.
An interesting theory, another presence among us. Right, coming up, we've got... welcome back to our phone-in, which is about encounters with aliens, which may sound weird, but we've based it on this new book by John Mack, who is the professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. It's called Abduction, and it's worth repeating. We said this at the beginning of the show, John. Someone who started off as a skeptic, you're a Pulitzer Prize winner and all the rest of it, have actually been convinced that the people you interviewed at great length and talked to you about their encounters with aliens, that they were actually telling the truth. There is something out there trying to contact us.
There's some kind of authentic mystery here, which my training in psychiatry just hasn't prepared me for.
Because as a psychiatrist, you would be able, first of all, to identify certain psychotic states, certain mental states, and therefore dismiss the stories as being a result of that. And two, you would also, with all the skill that you have, I mean, you're a top American psychiatrist at Harvard, you would be able to tell when people were telling fibs.
That's what I'm supposed to be trained to do, is to distinguish between fantasy, dream, psychosis, or authentic experience. And this has all the marks of authentic experience.
Because even if only some were lying, you would see an underlying pattern, wouldn't you, of either lies or mental disturbance. And the underlying pattern is people telling the truth.
Right, and these people don't want this to be true. I mean, they sometimes will come to me and want me to make it go away and give them a pill. And when they find other people are having the same experiences, they become shocked and tremble, and it freaks them out.
They really want you to explain it away, and in fact you can't. All right, we've had hundreds of calls, and all recounting similar experiences. We'll kick off with Ros from Essex. Good morning, Ros.
Good morning.
Good morning. Something happened to you in 1983.
That's right, yes. Me and my boyfriend was driving along, and the car actually stopped. It was stopped by this UFO. I was taken aboard the thing.
Hang on, getting a bit too fast. How do you mean it was stopped? Do you mean something came in front of the car?
No, the car actually just conked out. The lights went out. It just ground to a halt. It had all the... It felt like it'd run out of petrol or something.
Yeah, and then you were taken aboard?
I was taken aboard the ship. They told me that by telepathy that their world and their race is dying, and they need to find other genetic material, and would I mind helping them with their experiments.
It's like Bob a Job Week, isn't it? You know.
To which you said, thank you very much, but can I go home, please?
Basically, yes, I did.
So what happened to you?
They did various experiments, and the upshot at the end of it is that I can't have children anymore, and
what?
It's completely ruined my life. And I spent 10 years trying to prove that it was not, and it did not happen. I went to doctors, I got medical things. I eventually found out about a UFO society. In those days, it didn't exist. You weren't allowed to talk about this kind of thing.
What did they look like, Ros?
They were about 3'6". Yeah. Very large heads, very large eyes, slit for a nose, slit for a mouth, no ears.
Were you terrified?
I was absolutely petrified, yes. And it was a case of whether I liked it or not, they were going to do this. And I lost 2.5 hours out of my life, and I spent 10 years trying to get it back.
Is this part of the experiences in your book, that people can actually find themselves genuinely traumatised, and in some cases physically, severely traumatised by an experience
This is
like
very
this?
common that they are traumatized in this way. The whole story is a very familiar one, and it's this dense pattern of familiar experiences over and over and over again that convinced me that there was something powerful going on here. I wanted to ask her, Rose, did you have, was there anything about ourselves that the beings communicated to you? They talked about their own race, but what about us? Was there any information about us?
Yes, we are going exactly the same way as they are, our planet.
So what was did they tell you anything about the point of the two species coming together like this?
Yes, basically if they combine the two, then both species can continue as one.
You see, that's a very important point, because people, what are they up to? Or what are we doing? Or it's about us. What she's saying is that this is some connecting. We don't know who's managing this whole show anyway. I mean, who are the handlers for both of us, you know? But it is a bringing together which is serving perhaps the needs of both species in some evolutionary way.
What always bothers me, though, about stories like Roz's are two things. One, culturally, we've all seen E.T. We've all seen Close Encounters, and Close Encounters has the famous scene where the car stops, you know? So we all have that kind of access to that imagery, and it's very common. And yet, Steven Spielberg, when he wrote the film, did not claim that he had personally had that experience. And the second thing is this business of the two races coming together. That's informed science fiction writing for generations, certainly for decades.
What you have to understand that the process can go in the other direction. In other words, what Steven Spielberg did was to contact Alan Hynek, who was in charge of UFO research in the United States, to get the details of what we were already learning about this, and then he popularized
So light is informing art.
Exactly.
Ross, but actually, I mean, never mind these two species coming together, they obviously, you feel that they obviously hurt you. What happened to your boyfriend?
They never touched him.
Was he aware of something happening?
No, he didn't. Neither of us were aware of anything happening until we actually reached our destination and found we were 2 hours missing. It was after that I started remembering.
Did you go into hypnosis?
We tried that, but unfortunately the poor people that tried to hypnotise us, the room just, there was a blinding light turned up, all the cameras went blank, the poor person was pinned into his seats and all the clocks stopped, so they had to cancel it.
Actually, I have to say that there's the things like clock stopping and things.
Well, that's one of the problems here, is that, I mean, we're just beginning to develop a clinical tradition. I mean, these mental health professionals, for example, in Britain, don't accept this, so they don't learn to do hypnosis with this type of case. And it's in the underground, the grapevine, these cases avoid mental health psychiatrists and other mental health professionals because they don't accept it and they put them into pigeonholes instead of kind of taking it for what it is, for whatever that is.
Right, okay.
All right, Ross, thank you for calling. I'm going to move on to Maria from Kent. It's an extraordinary story. Now, obviously, this is all about, this whole phone is about aliens. You weren't aware of what happened to you, though, until you went into hypnosis.
Well, no, it's not strictly true. I did have some immediate recollection because I actually had some physical injuries to my body 2 days later that actually sent me scurrying to the local casualty unit.
All right, just tell us what actually happened as far as you're concerned.
Well, I woke at about 3:15 in the morning. I had a very strange compulsion to leave my bed. The room was filled with very bright blue-white light. And I can remember being told, you know, not to be afraid, you know, like a sort of voice in my head telling me not to be afraid. And there was all this light in the house, and I can actually remember walking down my stairs feeling very sort of almost paralyzed, not just of the body but of the mind as well, without any sort of conscious action on my part. I'm feeling really terrified by that. And actually, at one point when I reached the foot of our stairs, I was actually, I don't know how, I can't explain this logically, but I actually went through the front door. I was floated up through the solid front door, up into what appeared to be a column of light, and I could actually remember seeing my house and my garden and that disappearing below me.
All right. Can you tell us what these beings, what they actually did to you? The injuries that you say you got?
Yes. At one point, I had some hair removed from the back of my head, which left a perfect circular mark where the hair had been taken out, not just by the root, it was just gone as if it had never ever been there. I had a needle at one point placed into the back of my head behind my ear, and I had another one placed up my nose, which actually caused my nose to bleed following the experience. And I had 7 little pinpricks on the little finger of my left hand.
Maria, what were they like? What do they look? I was asking what I asked Roz. What do they look like to you?
They were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, a sort of tan grey colour, very big eyes. They looked like undeveloped children in that their bodies were very sort of skinny, and they moved quite sort of rigidly. They shuffled rather than sort of walked. And I did notice a peculiar smell, like a sort of rotting vegetation smell.
John's nodding away here. This is
every one of these details I've heard in many, many cases. You see, each person brings out many subtle details that simply are not in the media, and that's what gives this thing its robust quality. And much of this remembered without hypnosis. You feel, well, hypnosis isn't accurate or something like that. But much of the texture of this comes out just from recall like this.
So we seem to be, according to you then, what we're hearing is a common description of another species of life, which is about 3.5 feet high,
That's the most common
grey
one.
And waddles with big eyes.
Well,
really, that's what we're saying.
Yeah, and then these complex, detailed things, which do vary to some degree, but there is this kind of robust texture of the experience, which is simply deepens and becomes more elaborate, and details keep coming that simply are not in the media.
Well, they don't sound very pleasant. I mean, what on earth were they doing to Maria? Is this sort of medical experimentation? Is that something which comes out again and again?
Well, again, when you work with the individuals, you find out more about what this is about, what was done. There's a strong reproductive, as we heard in the first case, reproductive aspect of, sometimes they're hybrid children that are the product of the connection between the humans and the aliens. They're taken to see these hybrid children. This is a whole nother race is being created. Sometimes there are profound spiritual experiences that people undergo when they go through that dark night of the soul, that terror. It becomes a whole nother realm of experience of opening to the light, that the light becomes a divine light. So there's another dimension, but people have to go through this traumatic period before they get to that other level. This next call, David, I think, is a very interesting one.
All right, David, thank you very much for that, Maria. And David, who's 34, calling from Tyne and Wear. Morning, David.
Good morning.
Hi, tell us about it.
Well, I just had these experiences in the early 1970s when I was about 12 and 13. We were living in Wiltshire at the time, and I used to go off for walks into the fields on my own quite a lot. And one field in particular, just outside the village where we were living, I would always, entering this field, feel sleepy and fall asleep. And during this sleep, I would have these very vivid dreams about a light coming down into the field, and I would go into the light and meet all these beings, which were, I can only describe like the previous lady described them, about 4 feet high, like children like myself, because I was looking at I was about 4 foot odd myself at the time, and they were on about the same sort of level as me. And then I would wake up in this field and, you know, go about my business. And it was never a bad experience, though. They would, I would always go back to this field to experience these feelings again and see these people again. I regarded them like as friends.
Have you ever been back, David?
I went, actually, for the first time in about 20 years last year.
Did it happen to you again?
No, I not at all. I just remembered, it was last year that I saw the film Intruders, which brought back a lot of the memories for me, which I'd sort of buried, if you like, really. It was this film which brought them back to me and made me start wondering about them. And indeed, the memories became flooding back to me because of this film.
Which village was it, David?
Uphaven village in Wiltshire.
Which village?
Uphaven.
Uphaven.
Uphaven, yeah. It's my father was actually stationed at RAF Uphaven, and it was the first time that he'd rented accommodation outside of the RAF in the village there. And
strange things in Wiltshire.
Yeah, there was a lot of strange things going on.
David, could you describe the quality of the dreams? Were they different from like ordinary dreams?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, the fact that I would always go purposely to this field to fall into this sleep to have these dreams wasn't the run-of-the-mill thing anyway. The dreams were very, very vivid. I always felt safe in them, though. I never felt threatened. Although I did feel that I was being examined. That was the feeling, that I was taken into this light and these beings around me, you know, with the large eyes and small bodies and very pale skins as well. They were examining me. I had like the only way I can describe it is like a CD disc. A disc. One of them had this disc in their hand and threaded it into my head. Now, I didn't have any scars or anything like that, but I know that it went into my head. And
we have to wrap this because we're out of time. But you say that's common as well.
Yes, the sense of something being threaded into the brain, the mind change, biochemical changes in the brain, implants put in, and so much remembered by him consciously. He's had no hypnosis at all. He said he's considering doing hypnosis. So the whole notion that hypnosis is doing this is just ridiculous when you hear a story like this.
Well, there are many, many more stories. They all seem to be pointing in the same direction. In your book, Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens, E Mack.
I don't want to meet any. They sound horrible.
In a sentence, is there any evidence that people can conjure up these things, i.e. people watching think, oh, I'll have a go at that? You can call them down to you.
It's the last thing in the world they would want to conjure up. They're terrified by this. I mean, this is, it's a club no one wants to belong to.
Absolutely.
All right, well, listen, thank you for your calls.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much indeed, John. We found that fascinating. Sorry we didn't have time to get more calls.
Thank you both for having me on.
Thank you.
It's a great pleasure.
Right.